The first time I saw the Lost Madonna, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't anything obvious, no glaring anachronisms or amateurish brushstrokes. No, it was something far more subtle, a whisper of doubt that tickled the back of my mind as I stood before the newly acquired masterpiece in our museum's restoration room. I am Isabella Moreau. Izzy to my friends and colleagues, had built my career on moments like these. As a curator specializing in Renaissance art, I'd developed an eye for detail that bordered on the obsessive. It was a gift that had earned me respect in the art world, but also a curse that often left me second-guessing even the most authenticated works. But this was different. I leaned in closer, my nose nearly touching the canvas as I examined the delicate brushstrokes of the Madonna's face. The technique was flawless, a perfect mimicry of the great master's style. Yet something about the pigments felt off, as if they were trying too hard to look aged. Admiring our latest acquisition, Dr. Moreau? I straightened up, composing my face into a neutral expression as I turned to face Claudia Hart, my fellow curator and longtime rival. Her smile was as sharp as a knife's edge, her eyes glittering with barely concealed triumph. "It's certainly impressive," I said carefully, watching her reaction. "The provenance checks out?" Claudia's smile widened. "Impeccable. It passed every authentication test with flying colors. The board is thrilled. It's quite the coup for our Renaissance collection." I nodded, my mind racing. If the painting had passed all the standard tests, proving my suspicions would be no easy task. And if I was wrong, well, crying wolf about a multi-million-dollar acquisition wouldn't do my career any favors. "Well," I said, forcing a smile, "I look forward to studying it further. If you'll excuse me, I have a meeting to prepare for." As I left the restoration room, Claudia's voice followed me. "Oh, Izzy, your father called earlier. He said it was urgent." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. "My father? Victor Moreau himself. Isn't it exciting? He specifically requested our museum for the unveiling of his latest find, said he wouldn't trust it to anyone else." The implications of her words hit me like a physical blow. My father, the man I'd spent years distancing myself from, was suddenly inserting himself back into my carefully constructed world. And he was bringing with him a ticking time bomb of family drama and potential scandal. As I hurried down the hallway, my mind whirling with questions and half-formed theories, one thing became crystal clear. The Lost Madonna was just the beginning. A storm was coming, and I had a sinking feeling that I was standing right in its path. That night, as I sat in my apartment, surrounded by art books and digital scans of the Lost Madonna, my phone buzzed insistently. I glanced at the screen, my stomach clenching when I saw the name, Victor Moreau. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity, and a lifetime of ingrained filial duty, won out. "Hello, Father," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Izzy, my dear." His voice boomed through the speaker as charismatic and larger-than-life as ever. "I trust Claudia passed along my message? I have the most extraordinary piece to show you. A Caravaggio, can you believe it? Lost for centuries and now—" "Father," I interrupted, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Why are you calling?" There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his tone was more subdued. "Can a father simply want to speak with his daughter? It's been years, Izzy. I thought this might be a chance to mend fences." I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. The arguments about provenance and authenticity, the whispered rumors of shady deals and black market connections. The final, explosive fight that had led to my walking away from the family business and building my own career from scratch. "By using my museum for your latest discovery?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "How convenient." "You wound me, Isabella," he said, and I could almost see his theatrical wince. "This is a genuine find, I assure you. And I wanted you to be the one to authenticate it. To show you that I've changed, that I'm doing things the right way now." I wanted to believe him. Part of me, the little girl who had once worshipped her larger-than-life father, desperately wanted it to be true. But the curator in me, the woman who had seen too much of the art world's dark underbelly, remained skeptical. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Send over the preliminary documentation, and I'll take a look." "Wonderful." The enthusiasm was back in his voice. "You won't regret this, Izzy. It's going to be the discovery of the decade. Oh, and one more thing. Have you had a chance to examine the Lost Madonna yet?" Magnificent piece, isn't it? My blood ran cold. How did you know about that? Oh, word gets around, he said airily. Small world, the art scene. I'll be in touch about the Caravaggio. Sleep well, my dear. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in stunned silence. My father's call had left me with more questions than answers, and a growing sense of unease. How much did he know about the lost Madonna? And what was his real motive for reaching out after all these years? As I turned back to my research, a new determination settled over me. I would get to the bottom of this, no matter where it led. Because now, it wasn't just about a potentially forged painting. It was about my family, my career, and the integrity of the art world I had dedicated my life to protecting. Little did I know, I was about to uncover a conspiracy that would shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew. The next few weeks were a blur of late nights and clandestine investigations. By day, I went about my usual curatorial duties, all while keeping a watchful eye on the lost Madonna and the buzz it was generating in the art world. By night, I pored over every scrap of information I could find about the painting's provenance, the restoration techniques used, and the network of dealers and collectors involved in its acquisition. It was during one of these late-night research sessions that I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. A small discrepancy in the carbon dating results, buried deep in the technical reports. To an untrained eye, it would have seemed insignificant. But to me, it was like a neon sign flashing forgery. I needed help, someone with technical expertise beyond my own. That's when I thought of Elena Rossi, our museum's resident tech wizard. We'd worked together on several digital archiving projects, and I knew I could trust her discretion. Elena, I said, cornering her in the museum's cafeteria the next day, I need your help with something. Off the books. Her eyes lit up with curiosity. Color me intrigued, Dr. Moreau. What's the mystery? I glanced around to make sure we weren't overheard. It's about the lost Madonna. I think it might be a forgery. To her credit, Elena didn't laugh or dismiss my concerns. She simply nodded, her expression turning serious. What do you need? I need you to dig deeper into the digital records, trace the painting's history, analyze any photos or scans we have, look for any inconsistencies, no matter how small. Consider it done, she said, her fingers already twitching as if itching to get to her keyboard. I'll let you know what I find. As Elena set to work, I turned my attention to another pressing matter, my father's Caravaggio. The preliminary documentation had arrived, and it was perfect. Too perfect. Every detail of its provenance was meticulously documented, every test result impeccable. It set off the same alarm bells in my head as the lost Madonna. I needed to see the painting for myself. Swallowing my pride, I called my father and arranged to visit his gallery. As I stepped into the familiar space, memories washed over me. The smell of linseed oil and old canvas, the hushed reverence of valuable art, the larger-than-life presence of Victor Moreau holding court among his treasures. Izzy, he boomed, arms outstretched. Come, come. Let me show you our latest triumph. I followed him to a private viewing room, my heart pounding. And there it was, the alleged Caravaggio, a masterpiece of light and shadow, of raw emotion captured in oil and pigment. It was breathtaking. It was perfect. It was, I was almost certain, a fake. As my father launched into the story of the painting's discovery, I tuned him out, focusing instead on the minute details of the canvas. The craquelure, the subtle variations in brushstroke, the way the light played off the surface. All of it felt just slightly off, as if it were a masterful imitation rather than the genuine article. Well? My father asked, interrupting my examination. What do you think? I met his eyes, searching for any sign of deception. It's remarkable, I said carefully. I'll need to run some tests, of course, before I can give an official opinion. He waved a hand dismissively. Of course, but between us, Izzy, isn't it magnificent? Think of what this will do for the art world, for our family's legacy. Our family's legacy. The words echoed in my mind, carrying with them a weight of expectation and a hint of threat. I forced a smile. It certainly is something, Father. Thank you for showing it to me. As I left the gallery, my mind was racing. Two potentially forged masterpieces, both connected to my father, both set to make headlines in the art world. This was no coincidence. Something bigger was at play here. a conspiracy that reached far beyond a single fake painting, and I was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. The next few days were a whirlwind of covert meetings and hushed phone calls. Elena had come through with a treasure trove of digital evidence, revealing a complex web of transactions and altered records surrounding the lost Madonna. It wasn't conclusive proof of forgery, but it was enough to raise serious questions. "Look at this," Elena said, pointing to a series of timestamps on her computer screen. "The metadata for these provenance documents has been altered. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make them look older than they are." I leaned in, my heart racing. "Can you trace who made the changes?" She shook her head, "Not directly, but I can tell you this, the encryption used is high-level stuff. We're not dealing with amateurs here." As I mulled over this new information, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something, intuition perhaps, made me answer. "Dr. Moreau?" The voice was low, urgent. "We need to talk about the lost Madonna and your father's Caravaggio. Meet me at the Riverside Cafe in an hour. Come alone." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at my phone, a mixture of excitement and apprehension coursing through me. This could be the break I'd been looking for. Or a trap. An hour later, I found myself sitting in a corner booth at the Riverside Cafe, nursing a lukewarm coffee and trying not to look as nervous as I felt. The door chimed, and a man entered. Tall, distinguished, with piercing eyes that scanned the room before settling on me, he slid into the booth across from me, his movements graceful yet guarded. "Dr. Moreau, I'm Lucien Black. I believe we have a mutual interest in certain recent art acquisitions." I studied him, trying to place the name. Lucien Black, a collector if I remembered correctly. Known for his eclectic tastes and deep pockets. "Mr. Black, what can I do for you?" He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you can do for me, Dr. Moreau. It's what I can do for you. I have information about the forgeries, about the people behind them, including your father." My breath caught in my throat, telling this. "What's your stake in all this?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in cleaning up the art world. But be warned, Dr. Moreau, you're dealing with dangerous people, people who won't hesitate to destroy you if you get in their way." He slid a USB drive across the table. "Everything I know is on here. Use it wisely. And remember, trust no one, not even those closest to you." With that cryptic warning, he stood and left, leaving me staring at the innocuous-looking drive that could blow the lid off the biggest art scandal in decades. As I made my way back to the museum, my mind was reeling. Lucien Black's warning echoed in my ears. Trust no one. But how could I not, when I was in over my head? I needed allies, people I could rely on to help me navigate this treacherous waters. But who? Elena, with her technical skills? Claudia, my rival who might jump at the chance to expose a scandal? Or should I reach out to law enforcement, bring in the authorities to handle what was clearly a criminal conspiracy? One thing was clear, I couldn't do this alone. As I entered my office, I made a decision. I would confide in Elena, bring her fully into my confidence. Together, we would unravel this mystery, expose the truth, and protect the integrity of the art world I loved. Little did I know, my decision would set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. My career, my relationships, and my understanding of the very nature of art and authenticity. The game was afoot, and the stakes were higher than I could have ever imagined. Armed with the information from Lucien Black and Elena's digital sleuthing, I threw myself into the investigation with renewed vigor. Late nights at the museum became the norm, as Elena and I pored over documents, analyzed digital records, and pieced together the complex web of deceit surrounding the lost Madonna and my father's Caravaggio. It was during one of these late-night sessions that we had our first major breakthrough. "Izzy, look at this," Elena said, her voice tight with excitement. She pointed to her computer screen, where a complex network of transactions was displayed. "I've been tracing the money trail, and look where it leads." My eyes widened as I followed the flow of funds. Shell companies, offshore accounts, a labyrinth of financial maneuvers designed to obscure the true source and destination of millions of dollars. And at the center of it all, a name that made my blood run cold. Moreau Fine Arts, my father's company. "This goes beyond just 2 paintings," I murmured, the implications sinking in. This is a full-blown forgery ring, Elena finished. And your father's company is right in the middle of it. I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. Part of me had held out hope that my father was somehow innocent in all this, that he had been duped along with everyone else, but the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. As I grappled with this revelation, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Rooftop. Now, come alone. I showed Elena the message, my heart pounding. It could be a trap, she warned. Or it could be our mysterious informant. I countered. I have to go, but if you don't hear from me in an hour. I'm calling the police, she finished firmly, nodding gratefully. I made my way to the museum's rooftop. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped out, my eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. I told you to come alone, a familiar voice said, and Claudia Hart stepped into the light. I stared at her, shock and confusion warring within me. Claudia, you're the one who's been feeding you information? Yes. She lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating her tense features. I've been involved in this operation for years, but it's gone too far. People are going to get hurt. Why now? I demanded. Why come to me? She took a long drag, blowing out a plume of smoke. Because you're the only one who can stop it. You have the expertise, the connections, and most importantly, the moral compass that the rest of us seem to have lost along the way. As Claudia laid out the details of the forgery operation, the key players, the methods used, the vast sums of money involved, I felt a mix of vindication and horror. My suspicions had been correct, but the reality was far worse than I had imagined. Your father, Claudia said, her voice softening slightly, he didn't start out intending to create a criminal empire. But the art world, it has a way of corrupting even the best intentions. I thought of my father, his passion for art, his larger-than-life personality, his insatiable ambition. How had it come to this? As dawn broke over the city, Claudia and I parted ways, our unlikely alliance forged in secrets and shared danger. I had the information I needed to blow the whole operation wide open. But with that knowledge came a heavy burden. Exposing the truth would not only destroy my father's reputation and legacy, it would shake the very foundations of the art world. As I made my way back to my office, exhausted but determined, I knew that the hardest part of my journey still lay ahead. I had uncovered the truth. Now I had to decide what to do with it. The fate of priceless masterpieces, the reputation of my family and my museum, and the integrity of the entire art world hung in the balance. And I, Isabella Moreau, stood at the center of it all, holding the power to either expose the lies or become complicit in their perpetuation. The choice, I realized with a mix of fear and resolve, was mine to make. The weight of my discovery pressed down on me like a physical force as I sat in my office, surrounded by the evidence of a vast conspiracy. My father, the man who had introduced me to the beauty of art, was at the center of a web of forgeries and fraud that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the art world. I knew what I had to do, but the prospect filled me with dread. I had to confront him. With trembling fingers, I dialed his number. "Father," I said when he answered, my voice steadier than I felt, "we need to talk. In person. It's urgent." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken tension. "Of course, my dear," he finally replied. "Come to the house this evening. We'll have dinner, just like old times." Just like old times. The phrase echoed in my mind as I made my way to my childhood home, a sprawling mansion filled with priceless art and bittersweet memories. As I walked up the familiar driveway, I steeled myself for what was to come. My father greeted me at the door, his smile warm but his eyes wary. "Izzy, come in, come in. I've had the chef prepare your favorite." "I'm not here for dinner, father," I interrupted, my voice low. "I'm here about the lost Madonna, and the Caravaggio, and every other forgery you've been involved with." The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked old and vulnerable, nothing like the larger-than-life figure of my childhood. Then his features hardened, and he ushered me into his study. "So," he said, pouring himself a generous glass of scotch, "you've figured it out. I always knew you were too clever for your own good." "How could you do it?" I demanded, anger and hurt bubbling up inside me. "Everything you taught me about the value of art, about integrity, was it all a lie?" He sighed, suddenly looking very tired. "It started small, Izzy. A minor restoration here, a questionable provenance there. But the money, you have no idea how much money there is in this game. And once you start, it's so hard to stop. That's no excuse, I exploded. You've undermined the very foundation of our field. You've betrayed everything we stand for. And you've never been tempted? He shot back. Never looked at a wealthy collector willing to pay millions for a name, for prestige, and thought about how easy it would be to give them what they want. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat. Because he was right, I had been tempted. I'd seen the corruption in the art world, the emphasis on provenance over beauty, on names over talent, but I'd resisted. I'd chosen integrity. It's not too late, I said, softening my tone. Help me make this right. Turn yourself in. Return the real artworks. We can, what? He interrupted, his voice bitter. Destroy everything I've built? Drag our family name through the mud? No, Izzy, I won't do it. Then you leave me no choice, I said, my heart breaking. I'll expose it all myself. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to my shock, he began to laugh. Oh, my dear, he said, shaking his head. You have no idea what you're up against. This goes far beyond me, far beyond a few fake paintings. You start pulling on this thread and the whole tapestry of the art world will unravel. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? Think, Izzy, collectors who've spent fortunes on works that might be fake. Museums with questionable acquisitions. Entire reputations built on lies. Do you really think they'll let you expose all that? As the full implications of his words sank in, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. This wasn't just about my father, or even about a single forgery ring. This was about the very nature of art and authenticity in our modern world. I left my father's house that night with more questions than answers, and a growing sense that I was in far deeper than I had ever imagined. The choice before me was no longer simply about exposing a crime, it was about potentially reshaping the entire landscape of the art world. As I drove back to the city, my mind raced with possibilities and dangers. I had started this journey seeking truth and justice. But now I realized I might be on the verge of a revolution. And revolutions, as history has shown, are never without casualties. In the days following my confrontation with my father, I felt like I was walking through a minefield. Every conversation, every interaction, seemed loaded with hidden meanings and potential traps. I trusted no one completely. Not even Elena or Claudia, whose help had been invaluable, but whose motives I couldn't be entirely sure of. I threw myself into my work, using my position at the museum to dig deeper into the world of high-stakes art deals and acquisitions. What I found both fascinated and horrified me. My father had been right. The web of deceit and questionable practices extended far beyond a single forgery ring. It was woven into the very fabric of the art world. One afternoon, as I was poring over auction records in my office, there was a knock at the door. I looked up to see Lucien Black, the mysterious collector who had first tipped me off about the forgeries. Dr. Moreau, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I hope I'm not interrupting. I gestured for him to enter, my guard immediately up. Mr. Black, to what do I owe the pleasure? He settled into the chair across from me, his piercing gaze never leaving my face. I understand you've been investigating certain irregularities in the art world. I'm here to offer you a choice. A choice? I echoed, my heart rate picking up. He nodded, his expression grave. You're standing at a crossroads, Dr. Moreau. Down one path lies exposure, of the forgeries, of your father's involvement, of the entire system of smoke and mirrors that props up the art market. It's the path of truth, but I warn you, it's also the path of destruction. Careers will end, fortunes will be lost, the repercussions will be severe. I swallowed hard, thinking of my father's warnings. And the other path? A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. The other path is one of, shall we say, strategic reform. Use what you've learned to change the system from within. Help us create a new paradigm for authenticity and value in art, one that acknowledges the complexities of our modern world. Us? I asked, my suspicion growing. Who exactly is us, Mr. Black? He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. A consortium of collectors, curators, and yes, even artists. People who understand that the old ways are no longer sustainable, that we need a new approach to art and authenticity. I leaned back in my chair, my mind whirling. What he was proposing sounded dangerously close to legitimizing fraud, But was he entirely wrong? Hadn't I myself questioned the obsession with provenance over artistic merit? "I need time to think," I said finally. He stood, straightening his impeccable suit. "Of course. But don't take too long, Dr. Moreau. Events are moving quickly and soon the choice may be taken out of your hands entirely." As he left, I felt the weight of responsibility settle even more heavily on my shoulders. I had started this journey seeking simple truths, but now I found myself grappling with philosophical questions about the nature of art and authenticity. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself in the museum after hours, standing before the lost Madonna. I stared at the painting, trying to see past the brushstrokes and pigments to the deeper truth beneath. Was it a forgery? Almost certainly. But it was also beautiful, moving, a testament to human skill and creativity. If it could evoke genuine emotion, spark real contemplation, did its origins matter as much as I had always believed? As I stood there, lost in thought, I heard a noise behind me. I turned to see Claudia, her face pale in the dim light. "Izzy," she said, her voice urgent. "We have a problem. Someone knows what we've been doing. They're moving to stop us." My blood ran cold. "Who? How?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but we're in danger. All of us. Whatever you're planning to do, you need to do it fast." As Claudia's words sank in, I realized that the luxury of careful deliberation was no longer mine. The storm I had sensed gathering on the horizon was about to break. I had to make a choice, and I had to make it now. The fate of the lost Madonna, of my father's legacy, of the entire art world as I knew it, it all rested on what I decided to do next. With a deep breath, I made my decision. It was time to act. Consequences be danged. The art world was about to change forever, and I would be the one to set that change in motion. The next morning, I arrived at the museum earlier than usual, my mind made up and my plan set in motion. I had spent the night sending emails, making calls, and preparing for what would undoubtedly be the most significant day of my career, and possibly the most controversial event in recent art history. As the staff began to arrive, I called an emergency meeting. Standing before my colleagues, including a visibly nervous Claudia and a curious Elena, I took a deep breath. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "I've called this meeting because we're about to do something unprecedented. Today we're going to tell the truth about the lost Madonna, and about the state of authenticity in the art world as a whole." A murmur ran through the room. I saw shock, confusion, and in some faces, a glimmer of understanding. "I've invited members of the press, art experts, and yes, law enforcement to a special symposium this afternoon. We're going to present our findings on the lost Madonna, including evidence of its true origins. But more than that, we're going to open a dialogue about what authenticity really means in an age of digital reproduction and global art markets." The room erupted in a cacophony of questions and exclamations. I held up my hand for silence. I know this is shocking. I know it goes against everything we've been taught about protecting the reputation of our institutions. But I believe that by being transparent, by confronting these issues head-on, we have an opportunity to lead the way in reshaping how we think about art and its value. As I outlined the plan for the symposium, I could see the mix of emotions on my colleagues' faces. Fear, excitement, skepticism, but also in many eyes a growing sense of purpose. We were about to step into uncharted territory, and despite the risks, there was an undeniable thrill to it. The hours flew by, in a whirlwind of preparation. By the time the first guests began to arrive for the symposium, the museum was buzzing with an electric energy. I stood at the entrance to the main hall, greeting attendees with a calm alarm I didn't entirely feel. And then, I saw him, my father, striding through the doors with a storm in his eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, grabbing my arm. I met his gaze steadily. "The right thing, father." Finally. Before he could respond, I was called to the podium to begin the symposium. As I looked out over the crowded hall, journalists with their cameras and notepads, art experts leaning forward in anticipation, law enforcement officers watching with keen interest, I felt the weight of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice ringing out clear and strong, "thank you for joining us for this unprecedented event. We're here today to talk about authenticity, about the nature of art, and about the future of how we value and preserve our cultural heritage. Over the next hour, I laid out the evidence we had gathered about the lost Madonna and the larger network of forgeries and questionable practices in the art world. I saw shock, outrage, and disbelief ripple through the audience, but I also saw nods of recognition, as if many had long suspected what I was now confirming. But this is not just about exposing fraud, I continued, coming to the heart of my message. It's about questioning our entire approach to art. In an age where any masterpiece can be perfectly replicated, where AI can create stunning original works, what does authenticity really mean? Is a beautiful, emotionally resonant work any less valuable because of its origins? As I spoke, I could see the audience grappling with these ideas. Some looked resistant, others intrigued. My father sat stone-faced in the back, while Lucien Black watched with an inscrutable expression. I don't have all the answers, I concluded. But I believe that by having this conversation openly and honestly, we can forge a new path forward, one that values creativity, skill, and emotional impact alongside provenance and historical significance. The silence that followed my words was deafening. For a moment I feared I had made a terrible mistake. Then, slowly, applause began to build. It wasn't universal. I could see plenty of frowns and shaking heads, but it was genuine. As I stepped down from the podium, I felt a curious mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. I had lit the fuse. Now I could only wait to see how big the explosion would be. The art world would never be the same, and neither, I realized, would I. Chapter 9. Aftershocks. The days following the symposium were a blur of media interviews, heated debates, and long discussions with law enforcement. The art world was in an uproar, with opinions sharply divided. Some hailed me as a brave whistleblower. Others denounced me as a traitor to the institutions I had sworn to protect. My father, to my surprise, had disappeared immediately after the symposium. Rumors swirled about his whereabouts, but I had a feeling he was watching from afar, waiting to see how the chips would fall before making his next move. Claudia and Elena stood by me through it all, their support unwavering, even as we faced intense scrutiny. The museum board was in crisis mode, torn between damage control and embracing our new role as thought leaders in the authenticity debate. One afternoon, about a week after the symposium, I received a call from an unexpected source. Dr. Moreau. Lucien Black's smooth voice came through the line. I must say you've exceeded my expectations, and believe me, that's not easy to do. Mr. Black, I replied cautiously. I'm surprised to hear from you. I thought you might be upset about the exposure. He chuckled. My dear, I'm many things, but predictable is not one of them. You've shaken things up, just as I hoped you would. The old guard is reeling, and new opportunities are emerging. I'd like to discuss those opportunities with you, if you're amenable. I hesitated. Lucien Black was still an enigma to me, his true motives unclear, but I couldn't deny my curiosity. What did you have in mind? I asked. Let's just say that your little revolution has created some interesting possibilities for those of us who appreciate innovation in the art world. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership, one that could shape the future of how we authenticate and value art. I felt a mix of intrigue and wariness. I'm listening. Not over the phone, he said. Meet me at the Athenaeum Club tomorrow at 8 p.m. Come alone, and let's see if we can't chart a new course for the art world together. As I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of yet another precipice. The choices I'd made had set in motion changes I couldn't have anticipated. Now, it seemed, I was being offered a chance to guide those changes. But at what cost? And could I trust Lucien Black? I spent a restless night weighing my options. By morning, I had made my decision. I would meet with Black, hear him out, but remain on my guard. Whatever happened next, I was determined to stay true to the principles that had led me to expose the truth in the first place. As I prepared for another day of damage control and debates at the museum, I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. The art world was in flux, and I was at the center of it all. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. And perhaps, just perhaps, that wasn't such a bad thing after all. The Athenaeum Club was a bastion of old-world elegance, its wood-paneled walls and leather armchairs exuding an air of exclusivity and tradition. As I made my way through the hushed corridors, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony of discussing the future of art in such a staunchly traditional setting. Lucian Black was waiting for me in a private room, a glass of scotch in hand, and an enigmatic smile on his face. "Dr. Moreau," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "I'm glad you decided to join me." I sat across from him, my posture deliberately relaxed despite my inner tension. "You said you had a proposition, Mr. Black. I'm here to listen." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with excitement. "What you've done, Dr. Moreau, is crack open the door to a new era in the art world. But it's just the beginning. Imagine a future where art is valued not just for its provenance or historical significance, but for its impact, its ability to move and inspire." "That sounds noble," I said cautiously, "but how do you propose to achieve it?" "Blockchain technology," he replied, a hint of triumph in his voice. "We create a new system of authentication and valuation, one that tracks not just the origin of a piece, but its entire history. Every exhibition, every restoration, every emotional response it evokes. We turn art into a living, breathing entity whose value grows with its impact on the world." I had to admit, the idea was intriguing. And where do I fit into this grand vision? You, Dr. Moreau, would be the face of this revolution. Your expertise, your integrity, and now your reputation as a truth-teller make you the perfect advocate for this new system. Together, we could reshape the entire landscape of the art world. As Black laid out more details of his plan, I found myself both excited and wary. The potential for positive change was undeniable, but so were the risks. This new system could be just as easily manipulated as the old one, perhaps even more so. "I need time to think about this," I said finally. "It's a lot to take in." Black nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "Of course. But don't take too long. The window of opportunity won't stay open forever." As I left the club, my mind was whirling with possibilities. Black's proposal was bold, innovative, and not without merit, but was it the right path forward? And could I trust him to have the best interests of art and artists at heart? Over the next few days, I threw myself into research, exploring the potential applications of blockchain in the art world and discussing the idea with trusted colleagues. Elena was particularly helpful, her tech expertise providing valuable insights into the feasibility and potential pitfalls of such a system. Meanwhile, the fallout from my revelations continued to ripple through the art world. Museums around the globe were re-examining their collections, auction houses were scrambling to adapt their authentication processes, and a heated debate about the nature of artistic value raged in academic circles and social media alike. My father finally resurfaced, reaching out to me with a surprising olive branch. "You've turned my world upside down, Izzy," he said, during a tense but not unfriendly lunch. "But I can't deny that, maybe it needed to be shaken up a bit." As the weeks passed, I came to a decision. I would work with Black, but on my own terms. I drafted a proposal for a pilot program, one that would test the blockchain authentication system on a small scale before any wider implementation. "We start small," I told Black when we met again. "We be transparent about what we're doing, invite scrutiny and feedback. If we're going to change the art world, we do it openly and ethically." He considered me for a long moment before breaking into a wide smile. "I knew you were the right person for this, Dr. Moreau. Let's make history together." And so, as summer turned to fall, I found myself embarking on a new adventure. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and potential pitfalls. But it was also filled with the promise of positive change, of a future where art could be appreciated and valued in new and meaningful ways. As I stood in the museum one evening, gazing at the Lost Madonna, now openly labeled as a masterful recreation, and part of a special exhibit on authenticity and art, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The journey that had begun with a single suspicion had led me to question everything I thought I knew about art and value. But in doing so, it had also reaffirmed my deepest belief that art, in all its forms, has the power to move, to inspire, and to change the world. And that, I realized, was the truest measure of its value. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The art world would never be the same. And neither would I. As I turned to leave, already mentally preparing for the next day's meetings and debates, I couldn't help but smile. The adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning.